Trystie's Quest, or Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons. By Greville MacDonald. Chapter 15. The Wonderful River and Its Gentle Creatures, Mrs. Lark Again, the Fairy Castle. When Trystie was told by Captain Leprechaun to open her eyes again, she could not see for a few seconds, not that it was too light or too dark, but because she felt as if she had been sleeping and the things about her were all so unexpected. While her eyes were getting back their seeing, she heard her conductor finishing, as it were, some talk to her. "So before ye can get home again, princess dear, it's another pair of shoon I'll be making for ye. One pair to bring ye here, another pair to take ye there. This is the way of it in Fairyland, if ye have no wish to be somebody else when ye get anywhere. And now it's leave ye I must to choose your own way, for there's but one that'll take ye straight to your godmother." He paused a moment and then added very softly, "I pray you'll never scorn the little captain?" Before Trystie could make any answer, or understood that he was leaving her at once, he was gone. She looked round, but could see no door or way of any sort behind her. She called after him, "Captain, dear Captain, goodbye, goodbye, and come again soon, please." But the only response she could hear was the gentlest sound as of water making music like a harp's as it sped in and out among the rushes. That it was all water about her she could not doubt, for she was carried along, her feet hardly touching the floor of shining white and blue, green and red pebbles. But the water was somehow so good to breathe that she never thought how it was possible. Soon she saw and felt large silvery fishes stroking her sides and playing with the folds of her nightgown. They were winsome and gentle things in their caressing ways. She stroked one of them and then they all crowded about her, as if asking to be made friends of. Then she met, boldly swimming towards her, a great toad, with a pair of deep scarlet eyes looking wonderful in his great flat head. He wore a tight-fitting coat and breeches of Lincoln green. He stopped swimming, stood upright beside her, his head reaching up to her knees, and made his courtliest bow. Then he offered her a little webby hand so naively that she felt glad again and thought he was a very handsome fellow, beautifully shaped and clothed, and with such an interesting face. But she went on, saying to herself that half of her seemed to go because she wanted to go, and half because she must. The creatures seemed to understand her thoughts, for they all began to sing in silvery bright voices, "'Tis oh the life of the river rushing o'er pebbles and reed, and oh the love of the giver of life to the lilies and weed. Love is the laughter and love is the weeping, love fills the brook and the sea, love is the rainstorm, love the rill creeping over the meadow and lea. 'Tis oh the life of the river rushing o'er pebbles and reed, and oh the love of the giver of life to the lilies and weed. Blackbirds and blue-tits and silver-tongued thrushes drink and then lift up their praise, columbines, lilies, and river-grown rushes whisper their sweet roundelays. 'Tis oh the life of the river, rushing o'er pebbles and reed, and oh the love of the giver of life to the lilies and weed." Then there was silence but for the gentle Aeolian music. The toad came back and in a rather hoarse, whispering voice took up the song again. "Beyond our river are terrible places where Pigwidgeons glory in spite, where no flowers flourish but greed and grimaces, and grinnings that children affright." But the chorus of happy fishes sang loudly once more, "'Tis oh the life of the river rushing o'er pebbles and reed, and oh the love of the giver of life to the lilies and weed." In this way the fishes, such simple-hearted things as they were, made the child see what Fairyland meant, though it would be many years before she would come to understand it. She saw what this fairy river was doing for the country through which it ran, and she realized for the first time that Kit's Pigwidgeons were no mere playthings of his own making, as they had pretended to be, but real and dreadful people who lived in a world of fear and greed and hate and grimaces. Whether it was the music or the sweet air of the river itself, Trystie could not decide, but between them it is quite certain that she felt a great uplifting of her heart. This uplifting was full and radiant. It told her that the duty in her quest had grown much bigger. The mere finding of the iron chest, the opening it, and the distributing of the little choose keys which it held to a number of weary children, would not be enough. The quest, she now understood, was harder than this because the children would first have to understand that they really needed the keys, that without them they had nothing worth calling life, that the things they had come to like and live for were just so much rubbish and must be got rid of. I do not think that Trystie yet saw clearly enough to put her discovery into these words. I think she only felt them at present. One thing, however, is quite certain, that somehow, and because of the song, She began to associate in her mind her former companions in the Goblin Town with Kit's Pigwidgeons. She had a fairly accurate impression as to what Kit's creatures were like. She had often seen them before they disappeared, and, since Kit's intimacy with Crickety, his increasingly vivid description of that one in particular had made her partly understand the nature of them all. Indeed, many days before she started on her journey, she had begun to fear that the boy was in some danger and might suffer at the little monster's hands. So her quest now became more eager, because she would be able to do something for Kit as well as for those companions of her earlier life. Very quickly, it seemed to Trystie, the river widened and its current became gentler. She even told herself she would not have thought she was or had been in water at all, but for the little captains telling her so, and for the handsome toad and the gentle fishes and their singing. So she quite believed the river must be all about her still, if only because everything was so sweet and jolly. Soon, however, there were no more silvery fishes to be seen. Instead of them, there were all the wonderful flowers of Fairyland, indeed, just pink and white roses, and red-tipped daisies and buttercups and primroses and windflowers and yellow globeflowers and deep blue gentians and sky-blue milkworts, and pink centauri and red rattle and starry purple thistles and rampion and golden gorse and pink rest harrow, and every other lovely wild flower you can think of. There were all the birds of home also, and many from distant lands, such as yellow canaries and gorgeous hummingbirds and quiet green lovebirds. You might think, though Trystie didn't, that such flowers and birds couldn't live under water, and you would be quite right, for they would all drown in the common kind of water. But this was a fairy river, and not one of the creatures Trystie saw could anyhow live outside it. Besides, there were the fish, which perhaps you think couldn't live in the air. They couldn't live in common air, but this fairy air is life itself to the good in things. As the leprechaun once said to Trystie, it's more fish there will be in the air than ever drown in it, which was nice and sensible. Presently, too, Trystie saw, darting in and out among the gorse bushes and climbing roses, great numbers of little flat fishes, of all lovely colors. They flew about always two together, so that the pair of them looked like the two wings of a butterfly, and behaved very like a butterfly. Indeed, Trystie couldn't help thinking that two such fishes would sometimes actually grow up into one butterfly, that this butterfly would creep inside a big blue campanula bell and come out a flashing hummingbird, that this bird again would dart into a gorse bush and rise again on its topmost spike as a plain brown lark and rush away circling into the sky and singing praises of sweetness and jollity, all to gladden the heart of its queen. And so the child went on her way, half because she wanted to go and half because she must. More and more larks were about her and fewer of the gorgeous birds and fishes. She saw larks' nests too, hidden among the grasses and gorse bushes, such great woven nurseries these nests were, so that even she, tall girl though she was, had to stand tiptoe to see the eggs or the chicks inside. The mother larks were as big as herself, though the father larks, singing a grand oratorio in the sky, looked no bigger than bees. The music was so wonderful that Trystie sat down with her back against a nest, the more easily to look up into the sky and listen. She wanted the music to fill her still fuller with gladness. Over the side of the nest peeped Mrs. Lark. "Is that you, Trystie?" she asked. "Well, I am glad. You ought to have got here before this, for you are wanted. Our Kit is made a king, because they couldn't frighten him. It won't do him any good, and nobody can do them any good, perhaps even the Queen can't. So we must get him away." "Who have made him a king?" asked Trystie, now feeling very grave and really afraid for her dear Kit. "Pigwidgeons," replied the bird. "Then I must go to him." "Tell me where their country is, please," said Trystie. "Gallybird's Hole." "Where is that?" "Nowhere that counts here, thank goodness," said the bird enigmatically, and as if that was quite sufficient an answer. "But how do I get there?" persisted Trystie. "Get out of the river." "How can I do that?" "You can't, my child, you can't unless you take it with you." "Oh dear, Mrs. Lark," said Trystie half in despair at the useless answers, "do be sensible." "Be sensible?" "Indeed no, my child," replied the lark seriously. "I have great expectations from these 4 eggs and I mustn't." "Have a peep at them if you like." "But what can I do?" again asked Trystie, after looking at the eggs, just to be kind, but not at the moment feeling much interest in them. "Go to your godmother, of course, child," was the only answer. Mrs. Lark shook her wings out again, cuddled them over the grey, speckled eggs, and drew her head in, as if just a little bit hurt in her feelings. "There's her castle before you." Trystie looked up again and now saw that the larks were all swooping down in their diminishing spiral flight, circling a distant shimmering tower she had not seen before, and then rising again in widening circles. Thus the great choir music was increasing and lessening in wide throbbing waves. But now Trystie had eyes only for the shining tower. She ran towards it, and much faster than her feet would have carried her without the river's help. Soon the castle came in sight, and then the tower could be no more seen. The castle was built of great wooden beams and rough-hewn stones in between. It had overreaching windows everywhere, and in between and below them were great wide round arches. Wherever Trystie looked in at the lowest arches she saw into the loveliest garden, looking like a different one from each point of view. She had to go round and round the castle to find an entrance, but could not get up to any of these archways because of the moat. The moat was full to the grassy brim of some different kind of water from that in which she was still living and breathing. It was hard to say in what particular it was different, but Trystie thought it seemed runnier. Like the water of the fairy dewpond, it rippled and flowed, although there was no wind at all, and certainly nowhere for it to run away. Riding at anchor on its waves was the same fairy fleet that had raced across the dewpond full-rigged ships, some of them three-deckers, cutters, and schooners, old Spanish galleons, dragon-headed Viking ships, catamarans, junks, proas, gilded gondolas, and quaint little coracles. Their gay flags were all merrily flying away too, and changing into birds' yellow buntings. Trystie thought they must be. As she was watching them, a little pearly coracle came out from among the ships, swiftly paddled by a little sailor looking as light as thistledown but very strong of arm. He brought it up to Trystie. He said nothing, but without unshipping his paddle, offered the girl his hand. Then there was a delicious journey of a few minutes across the moat, towards one of the smaller arches that rose out of the water. A wood pigeon, in the garden within, Trystie supposed, began to coo softly. The little boat rocked from side to side, and made Trystie so sleepy that she closed her eyes. She thinks she dreamed, and that in her dream the rocking continued. She thinks she woke up again in a very few seconds, but would not open her eyes because she was so content with the rocking and the cooing of the bird, only it was different now, because, instead of being rocked, she felt as if she had hold of the boat's gunwale and was steadily keeping it gently going to and fro, to and fro, to and fro. Still with her eyes closed, she now seemed to be sitting down on a low stool on a firm floor, rocking the boat beside her. All this time she must have been slowly coming awake, because when at last she opened her eyes, she saw beside her, on the bare earthen floor, a baby's cradle. Lying in it peacefully was a little baby with thick smooth short hair, and wide open, blue eyes, such a loving mouth and never a tooth at all. It was only after a few seconds more of coming wide awake that she found the cooing was herself singing to the baby. River of love laps round the cradle I rock, angels above call to the shepherds and flock, run, dance and leap. For love in the manger bed, with eyes blue and deep, shines in the poor cattle shed. Sweetest of fun the babe to his father shall bring, and tears now all done with trust to his mother shall cling. Silver and gold gleam in the wild flowers' gifts, jewels untold rain from the heavy clouds' rifts. Shepherds now bring treasure in honey and fleece, wise men and king pray for the little one's peace. Oxen and ass wonder with big dreamy eyes, lover and lass pray for their morning to rise. Songbirds for joy scatter sweet carols of praise, child, girl and boy, dance to old nursery lays. River of love flows to the shining sea, the rainbow above gladdens each heart of the three. Trystie was not very much surprised to find herself singing so prettily. Nor was she a bit set up by it, because she knew it was the great river in her that made her sing. She felt more happiness than ever. For the river which had led her among gentle fishes and gorgeous flowers, which had made the lark's words plain to her, had now put her hands to this cradle to rock. As she sang she kept her eyes upon the baby. He looked at her with a great mystery in his deep eyes, reminding her of a radiant dawn breaking over the deep starry sky and the dew-drenched downs. Indeed, around his little head there could be no doubt about it was an aureole like starshine, faint and yet sure. It was but a low wooden shed in which she sat with the cradle, and there was not much light. The open rafters of the tiled roof were above, and an uneven clay floor was below. Light came through cracks and holes in the weatherboarding, and through one wider gap she could see the bright sunlit grass outside and one buttercup swaying in the wind. In the buttercup sat laughing and singing, and holding fast upon the petals, its own little fairy, dusty all over with golden pollen. Was this home-like shed, Trystie wondered, the Queen's audience chamber? End of this chapter.